Everyone in America, adults and school children alike, know George Washington was our first president. Wait, what? He wasn't supposed to be the first president? There are several candidates for that position. The president of the Continental Congress, for example. One of the presidents of the Congress was John Hancock. You know, the guy famous for his signature. Another president of the Congress in 1777 was Henry Lawrence. When the first Constitution was not completely ratified in 1781, the president of the Congress at that time was Samuel Huntington of Connecticut. After the Constitution was ratified, John Hanson of Maryland was the president in November 1782. That's when George Washington presented Charles Cornwallis's sword to the Congress. The Treaty in Paris was signed in September 3rd, 1783. That's when the war ended and we were granted our independence. Who was the president at that time? Well, it was Elias Boudinot of New Jersey. He apparently argued for the rights of blacks and American Indian citizens. In January 1784, the president at that time was Thomas Mifflin. He accepted the resignation of George Washington as the commander of the army. Yes, George Washington was a perfect fit to be the first president. He was smart, brave, led the colonial army to defeat the British, who were a much superior force. George Washington really did not want to be president. His thoughts were always turning from the battlefields and all these assembly halls, and he was looking for a more modest place. His home in Mount Vernon, for example. And he thought, and I quote, "living and dying a private citizen on my own farm." This was a perfect scenario for him. Little side information. Washington had to walk home after his inauguration in New York City because the streets were so crowded. So who else could have been president? Well, many think that Peyton Randolph would have been the first president. Well, he was elected Attorney General to the colony of Virginia. In the same year, he was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he later became the Speaker. He was also the chairman of the Virginia Conventions. And he was, of course, the first president of the Continental Congress. Today, he is considered to be one of the founding fathers of the United States. Many think he would have been elected president except for one thing. Well, Peyton Randolph was a pretty heavy person. While visiting Philadelphia, he suffered a possible 5-hour-long stroke and died while dining with his cousin Thomas Jefferson on October 22, 1775. He was only 54 years old. Peyton Randolph died less than 1 year before we declared independence. Now let's listen to an interpreter at Peyton Randolph's house in Colonial Williamsburg.
This 3/3, the corner house that was completed in 1717, was a tenement house. Bare bones, nothing fancy in it at all. As a matter of fact, the second floor wasn't even completely plastered when they moved in. So most of 80% of the population of Virginia could not afford this house. This is for a 4% of the population that has the wealth. Sir John and Lady Susanna came here when he was appointed as the governor's attorney general. They lived in Tazewell. He had to have property in town, and so he bought this 4.5 acres. It's prime property, and it was minimal living in there. They have a plantation, they have a manor house. This is nothing, but it's in a great location because it's very visible from Duke of Gloucester. Peyton is the second son. He was about 3 years old when his father and mother moved into this property. Peyton and his younger brother John go to England. They become barristers. So they follow in their father's footsteps and get their barrister. They can practice law anywhere in the British Empire. Peyton is going to come back here and be the youngest attorney general. At age 23, he will take that position on. At the same time as he takes that position on, he is also going to represent the city of Williamsburg down the street in the House of Burgesses. But he will become the Speaker of the House. The seat, the chair that is in the House of Burgesses down there is his chair, his original chair for over 20 years. So, but that's not the end of his political career, because in 65, there's going to be a tax that's going to just start the ball rolling towards the revolution. This is a tax, an unfair tax, put on 13 colonies that were told that they would have a say in what goes on in Parliament, and they didn't. King George just decided he needed the money, he's fighting wars, he needs an army, and we'll just tax you. So Peyton is going to get involved in a couple of things. As that tax gets repealed, now we're going to have some other taxes, and the 13 colonies are going to decide to meet in Philadelphia. So Peyton will be part of the delegation from Virginia, and he will be unanimously elected as the president of the First Continental Congress. He is instrumental in the writing of the document of treason. His second cousin is his strength. He is great with words. He doesn't like to speak. So we have John Adams putting his 2 cents worth in. We're going to have Peyton and a few others putting their 2 cents worth into that document. But the 55 men who have to sign it are going to say, if we call the king a tyrant, there's a punishment. And so we need to go back home, talk to our constituents, and then we'll come back here in September and meet again, which they do. Peyton again is going to be the president for about 20 days. And then he suffers a stroke and dies in Philadelphia. Yes, he was on the list to be president. He was way more popular than George Washington, who never wanted to be president anyway. So Peyton is going to drop off the history books at that point, because we only talk about the people who signed, and his should be the first signature at the bottom of that document, not John Hancock's. So, but because it isn't, 98% of the people who walk onto this property have no idea who Peyton Randolph is. He's going to inherit this from his mother. His mother is a femme soul at the time. After his father dies, she's allowed to stay in that house. But he's going to marry Elizabeth Harrison in 1745. There are 3 names in Virginia that hold the 1% of the top money, and their last names are Carter, Harrison, and Randolph. So 2 of them are going to live in the house. So Peyton and Elizabeth decide we're going to make our name known, because Peyton has power. He's going to show power to that person down the street. And there'll be a conflict constantly going on between this property and that one, because this dining room is going to hold George Washington, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and anyone else who wants to speak out against the king. And she brings, in her dowry, she will bring wealth to the marriage too. So between them, they own 3 plantations, 109 enslaved people. 27 of those enslaved people are going to be on this property. 27 for 2 people living in the house. They have no children. They have a big social life, yes, but 27 is a lot. So in the house, you're going to have your waiting man and woman. They take care of every single thing except feeding their master and mistress. You're going to have a housekeeper. You're going to have a butler. He has about 12 horses in the back pasture. He's going to have a big stable. And so you're going to have enslaved people taking care of that. We got 15 people that we have to house. Now, ordinarily in a city, you're going to have your kitchen and your laundry, separate buildings, and your enslaved person working in there is going to live in that building. They built this. He called it the servants' hall. It is slave quarters, basically, because you have a kitchen and a laundry on the first floor, and you have sleeping quarters on the second floor for 15 people, 8 of whom are children. And that would include the dairymaid, that would include the seamstress for the textile room. All right, so we have this big building, which is very noticeable in town. Then he's going to put a passageway here to the house. He's going to paint the whole thing Spanish brown, which from Duke of Gloucester looks like aged brick, and that was the intention of that particular color. If you are coming down Duke of Gloucester, remember that courthouse across the street wasn't built till 1770. What's the first thing you're going to notice? This huge complex, and that was the intention of it. This is very much showing power and wealth here. Okay. This room will have 27 people in it at night, enjoying their evening meal. This is the only time that they will be able to gather together privately in this room. Some will go up there to go to bed. This is the largest kitchen on a domestic site in Williamsburg. It's the second largest kitchen in Williamsburg because, here we go, we're competing again. We're going to have lots of meals here, but so is the palace. we're going to have a lot of dignitaries here. So is the palace. We need a big kitchen. We know that if you are serving a meal here, it's 3 or 4 courses of food. And if it is that, you're going to have 12 to 14 items that are going to be prepared. So the parlor is a room of entertainment, and right above you are Peyton and Elizabeth, and they are welcoming you to their home. The main meal of the day, served between 1 and 2, will be served in the dining room. After that meal, there will be tea service set up in here for the ladies. They will come over here. The gentlemen will stay in the dining room. They're going to do their proper digestion of food by having some wine, smoking their pipes, and their political conversations. You see the doors closed. Mrs. Randolph says the ladies have their own ideas about how to digest their food and what to talk about. So she will be in control, though. She controls the entire meal, and she'll also control how long it takes between dinner and entertainment. So she may have hired a musician to come and play. They could have a storyteller come in. They may have one of the Enlightenment people coming. For a gathering in your home, they will talk about the Enlightenment, the science that was so endearing to George Wythe down the street that he had a club that met every week. So microscopes and telescopes and fossils and crystals and all. Every house has one of these. You cannot go into a gentry house without seeing a card table. And if all else fails, or even if it doesn't, the gentleman will figure out a way to play cards at some time during the evening. And if there's a card game, there's a wager. Remember we had. So there are 6 book presses in his law office. Those book presses have not only his books, his documents from legal things, but his father's also. And those 6 were obtained by his second cousin, Thomas Jefferson. And Mr. Jefferson also was in George Wythe's will, and he inherited 600 books from George Wythe as law books. And with those 2 collections of books, that became the foundation for the Library of Congress from these two buildings. And his 2 brothers, Beverly and John, that's where they would have grown up. And that has paneling in it too. That's the oiled paneling. Always on the 2nd floor. This means that you can take your meals up here. You can have a glass of wine before bedtime. You notice that there is a floor cloth. Floor cloth protects that wood floor underneath. And if you have children in your house, this is where they take all their meals. Okay? Now you got 2 16-year-olds over there. And we're going to have an 11-year-old that's in Mary's room. Mary was their sister. We don't know too much about Mary, but they had an orphaned niece who came here and spent her up to her age of majority in learning how to take care of a household because she was out on the Berkeley plantation. And another bed chamber. So Mr. and Mrs. Randolph are going to get a better bed chamber. And the first little room that is there is called the lumber room. That is kind of a big closet for your suitcase when you're not traveling. So Palladium window is in the courthouse. Palladium windows are in the Capitol building. This is a window that is built and designed specifically to designate a building as a government building. You see where it is located? This is not a government building. Why is Mr. Randolph putting this side window in his home? He and Elizabeth put that 10-foot tall black walnut door in. That's the original door. And the whole idea of that door and this window is to make a statement. He is making a statement about how important he is and how powerful he is.
Well, thanks for watching. We'll keep the videos coming here on Strange History. Check out our video on the siege and massacre of Fort William Henry.